Hello. So recently I asked you all to ask me anything within reason, and you've come up with some fabulous questions. I've put some of them together where some of you asked the same question. I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as I can, so this isn't the world's longest video. Okay, first up, this was asked by Amy O'Brien and Abigail Lavers. Do you have a favourite book you've written? This is a really tricky question, as I suspect that you thought I'd find it hard. And it is, because I love my books for different reasons. But if you really pinned me down, I would say that Strangers is my favourite in terms of characters. Ursula is my favourite character I have ever written, and she's still got a place in my heart. But The Fear is my favourite book in terms of plotting. I think that ticked all of the boxes in terms of being sort of quite heart in mouth and having high stakes and lots of tension. But I'll come back to that sort of thing in another question. All right, next one was asked by Steph Edgar, Tracy Morgan and Sue Ward. Who are your go-to authors whose books you'll read no matter the subject area? This has really changed over the years. When I was younger, I was all about sort of dystopian novels, George Orwell and Aldous Huxley. I'm still a massive fan of Margaret Atwood. I'll read anything she puts out. I'm a big Leanne Moriarty fan. Her books have frequently got me out of reading blocks. I love Liz Nugent's books. Also Catherine Ryan Howard. Mark Edwards is always a great one for a bit of darkness in my reading. And I love Belinda Bauer's darkly humorous, twisted mind. And then there's Maggie O'Farrell, who is an absolute superstar as far as I'm concerned. This one is from Anna Sigardóttir. I'm really sorry if I said that wrong. I probably said that wrong. Hopefully my Icelandic pronunciation will get better when I go to Iceland Noir in November. Hopefully see you there, Anna. Do you think of the ending first and build the book around that, or does the plot come to you as you start writing? So I do plot before I write anything. Typically I'll start with a sort of scenario that I think is quite interesting, a sort of what if question. And I will have an ending in mind. I'll plot at various points, but it often changes once I start writing. I find often the first few chapters or scenes that I've come up with will remain in the book. But the more I write and the more I get to know my characters and the more twists and turns the book takes, it slightly veers off course from what I plotted. And very often the final twists that I come up with, I don't come up with until I get near the end of the book. Everything seems to sort of slot into place then. I've never come up with a twist and written towards that twist. Christian Johnson. As you're watching TaskMaster, who's your favourite from the current series? I absolutely binged TaskMaster last year during lockdown. I watched all of them. And it just made me laugh and kept me sane. I love Greg and little Alex Horn. But in this series, I like Guz and Desiree, who are making me laugh. I mean, they're all making me laugh. It's just brilliant. If you haven't watched TaskMaster, give it a go. At first you'll be like, what the hell is this? And then you'll kind of get into it. Errol Mehmet. If you're going out with friends or family or on holiday and an idea pops into your head, do you try to write it down somewhere? Yes, absolutely. If I'm with friends and family, I feel perfectly comfortable to say, oh, hang on a second, I just need to write that down. Or, oh, you just give me an idea for something. I use the Notes app in my phone mostly these days, but occasionally if I'm on a train or something, I'll just find whatever piece of paper that I've got in my bag. If I'm in polite company, I won't do that, but but I will try and find an excuse to sneak off, so I'm going to the loo or something, and write it down then and just repeat it in my head whilst trying to follow the conversation. Linda Blackburn, with each book, does it get more difficult to come up with an original idea? Yes, it does. The book I've just finished is book 9 of my psychological thrillers and mysteries. And I feel like I've covered so much. I've covered, domestic violence. I've covered missing children. I've covered a stranger coming into town. What else have I covered? Revenge. Missing sister. Strangers was an event that brings people together, a crime that brings people together. It does get harder because although I have written 2 missing people books, The Missing and Her Last Holiday were very different because of the relationship between the main character and the missing person. But I probably wouldn't write another missing person book. And actually, book 9 is something different again, which hopefully I'll tell you about more soon once I've had my edits back from my editor. But it's different again. And that's what keeps me interested and keeps me writing. I couldn't write the same thing over and over again, but it does get much harder to come up with original ideas. Matthew Hampton, when you get an idea for a book, how do you know which ones will make a good story? That's a really good question. A lot I rely on gut instinct. I will feel that spark of excitement in my gut if it's a good idea. But after that, I need to work through. When I'm trying to process an idea, I'll start off by saying, what is it that the main character wants? What's their goal? How do they change emotionally over the course of the book, or what do they learn? What are the obstacles that I can put in their path? But more than that, for me, the ideal idea has really high stakes. If the main character doesn't achieve their goal, then something terrible will happen. And also they've got a lot to lose if they don't pursue their goal. And it really helps if you've got a ticking time clock as well. They must reach their goal by this point or this terrible thing will happen. So if you have all of those things in an idea, that's what's going to get the reader desperately turning the pages and feeling quite frantic. And I've come up with a lot of ideas in the past which really, really interested me. But when I tried to see if there were high stakes, or if the character had a lot to lose, or if there was any kind of ticking clock, there wasn't. And I knew that would make them less tense and less of a page turner. Sometimes I don't have the ticking clock. But for me, if I can have a ticking clock, which I have got in the one that I've just written in book 9, then that gives that sense of urgency to desperately turn the pages. Okay, next page. Daniel McBreakneck. Is that your real name? What's your favourite book you've read this year? I've read some brilliant books this year. I've read the new one by Luca Veste, which I hugely enjoyed, and I think it's his best book so far. But the one that absolutely wowed me beyond others was 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. The plotting is just so clever. Honestly, I had writing envy when I read that. And Daniel's asked another question, which is, which author were you most starstruck to meet? That was probably Margaret Atwood. I met her before I had my deal. I went to London Book Fair and she gave a talk. I wasn't allowed to talk to her when she was doing a signing, but just being in her presence, I was absolutely starstruck. Joanna Perdue, posh pen or cheap biro? I love these roller balls. What are they called? Uniball or something. Uniball, yeah. I have got some really nice fountain pens that I've asked for birthdays and Christmas and stuff, but I don't really use them. The rollerball's just the best. And for ideas, any old notebook, or do you stick to a regular style of notebook? Well, the last few books I've gone massively into. I'm just rearranging this because I'm going to hide the working title. But these notebooks by Papier, so I can get my name and my working title on them. and they're just things of beauty. And I start one for each book, and then I typically just write notes in my phone and pick up random bits of paper. But I like to, it's part of my process, have a new papier notebook with my working title for each new book. Sasha Childs, what advice would you give someone of any age who was interested in getting into writing or wanted to write a book? That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Finish it. Study the books in your genre that have already been published and that have done well, to see how the author achieved, the page turning quality or elicited emotion in the reader. And don't give up, even if you think it's rubbish. We all of us, published authors or not, feel like our books are rubbish when we're writing that first draft. But you can't edit a blank page, so get it finished and then put it in a drawer for a while and look at it again, and you'll see it much clearer after you've given yourself some space, and you can see where it's not quite working. One thing that I do is, when I'm reading through a book that I've just written the first draft, when my attention wanes, I will scribble in the margin or use my Kindle and put a note and just write boring. And then when I finished reading, I'll look at all the bits where I wrote boring and work out why it's boring. And should I just delete that scene, or should I rewrite it to make it more exciting? I hope that helps, but this could be like a whole massive conversation. Lee Wright, would you adapt one of your stories into a screenplay? Not without supervision. The only thing I've ever done in terms of screenplays is I attended a course for writing 10-minute films, writing screenplays for 10-minute films in Brighton years ago, about 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And I loved it. I really loved it. But I've not been on a course to write screenplays. I have no experience of writing screenplays. But I would love to. If one of my books got optioned and I got the option to work with somebody on the screenplay, I'd love to learn that. You're right, it's a completely different skill. Birgit Clark, is being a full-time author everything you hoped it would be? Any surprising upsides and downsides? I'll be honest, I thought I'd have a lot more free time being a full-time author. I thought there'd be a lot of sort of lounging around and going to museums and watching films on my own in the day and stuff. But yeah, just no. I've never worked as hard in my life. And a big part of being an author is constantly carrying stuff in your head. So even if you're not writing or you're not editing or you're not doing promotion, you're always thinking about it. You're always thinking about characters and stories. You can watch a TV show and you're analysing the structure without even realising it. It's quite relentless and it's quite hard to turn off. When I go on holiday, I have to get away from the internet because my social media is full of bookish news and authors talking about deals and bloggers talking about books that they loved. So I have to step away from the internet if I want to turn off. But the most surprising thing is getting the love from readers, getting the emails and the tweets and the Facebook messages and the like that really move you, because your book's made a difference to somebody or helped them out in a dark time or got them reading again. That's always one that feels like a massive honour. If somebody says they weren't into reading, then they read one of my books and now they're reading loads. I didn't expect that. That's definitely a high point. All right. Final page. Oh dear, I can't read my own writing there. Is that Anur Osland? Anise Osland? Sorry, I can't read my own writing. Any musical influences, either for a book or to get you in the zone? Yeah, I'm just looking at my iTunes here so I can tell you. I typically love listening to film soundtracks when I'm writing, and I'll try and choose one that kind of fits the mood of the book. Often I come back to the soundtrack for In Time, which was a Justin Timberlake sci-fi film, but it's very tense and it really gets me going. For this book, I discovered from Barnaby Walters, who's also an author, Rambo Last Blood soundtrack. And I was a bit like, really? Really? That's a good one to write to? But it's brilliant. I wrote most of this book to that soundtrack on repeat. Also, I used The Last Samurai soundtrack a bit, Widow's soundtrack a bit, although that's got some actual lyrics towards the end, and I don't like listening to lyrics. That always pulls me out of what I'm writing. And the Dark Knight soundtrack. So I used a combination of those depending on what mood I was in. Tracy Lee Fulton and Maureen Devonshire said, do you get character ideas from people watching, or are these people you already have in mind? No, not so much people watching, but I do people watch. Recently I went to London. I got a taxi from Paddington down to London Bridge, and I realised how much I'd missed people watching over the pandemic. Because everybody's got a story, and you can't help imagining what those stories are. But I'm not sure where characters come from. They seem to just pop into my head, particularly the more unusual characters like Ursula from Strangers, or Wendy from The Fear, or Fran from Her Last Holiday. Those more sort of unusual characters just seem to pop into my head from nowhere. And it's probably the result of, 47 years of reading and watching telly and watching films and all that sort of thing. The main characters are a bit harder because they're typically more of your sort of every woman. So I have to think quite hard about what sets this main character apart from the other main characters in my book. So I think a lot about their backstory, where they came from, what their family's like, whether anything awful happened in the past, what their hopes and dreams are. And I just tend to spend a lot of time thinking. I don't answer questionnaires or any of those sorts of things. But then it's only really when I start to write the book that their sort of voice comes through and their personality comes through. By the end of the book, I know them. So I often have to go back to the beginning and tweak a little bit at the beginning. But yeah, it's a bit sort of evolves. It's a process that evolves with the main character. Tracy had another question. Do you ever go into a dark place after finishing a book, and how do you get out of that? Yeah, that's certainly happened with some books. The Missing and The Fear in particular had quite dark subject matter. Oh, and The Escape, because the main character had agoraphobia and was very, very anxious. So when I'm writing a character, I kind of become them. It's kind of like writing method acting. And so I'm feeling the emotions that they feel. And so I will feel exhausted, emotionally exhausted after a day of writing. And also with The Missing, I read a lot of very dark books about children being kidnapped or going missing. And that was really, really hard to push out of my head. I could never be in the police working on sort of child exploitation and abuse cases, because I don't know how they turn off. But I typically just watch really inane telly. So I'll watch something like TaskMaster or Would I Lie to You, which will make me laugh, or I'll watch some banal reality TV. I can't watch anything dark after I've been writing something dark. I have to watch something light. Paula Tokarski, which of your books would you like to be adapted to a film? All of them, please. It's often the case where the one that I've finished the most recently is the one that I'm most desperate to be made into a film. When I wrote book 9, I saw it as a TV series. Like, as I was writing it, I saw each scene as a separate shot, a scene in a TV series. So I kind of feel, and also book 9 is all set in London. So it wouldn't cost very much in terms of location. You don't have to go to any kind of exotic place to film, or at the top of a mountain or whatever. So yes, so, I mean, sleep is still under option. It was renewed, so they had the option to turn it into a TV series for 18 months, and then 18 months were up, and then they've renewed it. So this and a pilot script has been written, not by me, for Sleep, but I have not heard any news in ages, and that's typically the case. When Helen Fitzgerald's The Cry came out, I think it had been published 10 years before it was shown on the BBC. So these things are really slow. And the majority of the time when a book is optioned for TV or film, nothing happens. I mean, The Escape and The Lie were both optioned, and those options weren't renewed. So that means that there's no progress at all. They tried to get them made, failed, and that's it. So yes, it would be the dream to see something on the TV or on Netflix or at the cinema. But yeah, wait and see. And finally, this is from Moira Connor. Do you always have ideas brewing away in your mind for future books, or is it sometimes a struggle? It was a massive struggle this year. I've posted about this on Facebook before. I came up with the basis of an idea, and I was quite excited by it. But as I tried to work out the plot and write an outline, my gut was just nagging at me, saying, this doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I couldn't fix it. I tried and tried for like 2.5 months to try and fix it and make it work. And I just knew it didn't. So when I showed the outline to my editor and she said, no, it doesn't work, I was almost relieved, because it meant I could scrap it and start again. Yes, I don't have ideas. Some authors will be writing a book and they'll be inundated with ideas that they desperately want to write instead of the book that they're writing. My brain doesn't work like that. When I'm writing a book, I'm completely immersed in it, and the characters and what's going to happen next and twists and turns. I haven't got the headspace for new ideas. What I have to do is when I've finished, I'll then read lots of non-fiction, watch documentaries, watch random films, just waiting for that spark of inspiration to hit. And it will. I just feel like I'm a bit spent creatively after writing a book, and I just have to kind of get that sort of stimulation from other people's creativity and other people's stories for my brain to then start up again and start sort of snatching at ideas. But it's always quite nerve-wracking, because you're like, what if I don't come up with another idea for a book? Then what? I would never want to write a substandard book or a book I wasn't excited about. But so far, I've written 13 books altogether, including the young adult and the rom-coms. So far, the ideas have come. So I'm sure they will again. Touch wood. All right, that's it from me. Thank you so much for all your questions. I hope you enjoyed this little Q&A, and hopefully I'll be in touch soon to tell you a little bit more about Book 9. Bye.